So anyway, then, I could see a scar, and then I realized that I had been circumcised, and I found out, I talked to people who were experts who said that, yes, they circumcised little girls in the United States at that time, and they didn't even outlaw it until 1997.
Are you a Muslim, Patricia?
Oh, no. I
And
was raised in
so,
a Lutheran church.
and so there's
I'm
Americans that are involved in circumcising their daughters who are not Muslims?
Yes,
They're,
that's correct. There are red-blooded, all-American Lutherans and Methodists and Catholics and who knows what else. Little girls being circumcised in this country. Now, I don't know if it's technically illegal now, but
Mhm.
I mean, who knows how many people have actually been subjected to this, given that Patricia was 50 years old before she found out.
the interesting thing to me is that we live in a culture where female circumcision would be considered absolutely wrong and horrifying and bad and evil, but the same culture normalizes the circumcision of infant boys. And
Right.
an extreme disconnect
Mhm.
with that,
Right.
where it's not good, not okay for girls, but it's okay for boys. Did you want to say something else, Patricia?
The beautiful thing was that being on these mailing lists with these men, I received a great deal of support and comfort from these guys. They would write and say, when you said that you were circumcised, I cried. And so anyway, there's a very sweet group of people that I'm involved with who are working against this whole circumcision practice. And they
Yes.
come from all different religions and all different cultures.
And for my listeners, in the United States, we call that the intactivist movement. We know that in the UK and other parts of the world, little boys are not being circumcised the way they are in the United States and in Israel. So this is a particular cultural context that we're talking about, where little boys are being ritually sexually tortured, and apparently little girls are as well. So, um, but it's not around the world, thank God. So, Rich, we haven't had an opportunity to have you introduce yourself. And how did you get involved with this whole thing about circumcision and obstetrical abuse?
Well, my family history, my mother was pretty much murdered by psychiatrists who
Oh,
were involved at the time back in the 70s. Psychiatrists were openly talking about the benefits of using electroshock treatment on unhappily married women as a form of brainwashing. They were very frank about this. And my mother was subjected to this treatment, and she killed herself shortly afterwards. But, she was already dead. I mean, after she came back from the hospital, she was like a smoldering volcano, very quiet, didn't say anything, but if you looked, you could see the rage and the despair deep inside. So I was familiar with the idea of medical atrocity. I guess I was about 45 years old when I discovered what circumcision was all about. And then it took time for it to sink in, to figure out what I'd lost and how it had impacted me. And it took even longer to figure out that I had actually remembered the event. I just didn't know what it was at the time. I mean, it was basically an imprint. I can tell people what an imprint looks like visually. It's
mm-hmm.
it's like the desktop background on a computer against which all the icons are placed. It's
uh,
just it's just something that is so fundamental. It's like a fish in water. You
yeah.
don't see it, but it's part of who you are.
It's
So
very much a part of who you are, that memory. And I want to clarify for my viewers that in the United States, when babies are circumcised, they make these little boards called circumstrains. Little boards have the shape of a little baby's body in it. So the baby's body fits nicely in this board, where the baby is then strapped. His little arms are strapped. His little legs are strapped. Sometimes they put a cover over his body, a sheet or something with a hole where the penis is, and someone will make the penis erect in order to make it more easy to work with. And once the penis is erect, it is, the glands are systematically clamped and crushed, and the forceps is sliced for 5 or 10 minutes or however long it takes them to do what's called the procedure. That has no medical benefit whatsoever. There's no medical need for this procedure. It is done 96% of the time without any anesthesia. And what we are seeing is trauma-based mind control. This is a procedure that is also done in trauma-based mind control in the same way that what happened to your mother, Rich, with the electroshock therapy, that's also done in trauma-based mind control. Electric shocks are used to control the mind. And so we're seeing it in the medical system in various aspects. Too many to go into detail in this particular show, but we're seeing it over and over and over again. So are both of you part of the intactivist movement then? I know you said you are, Patricia, and that you are involved with many men who are, I guess many men and women who are trying to protect babies?
Yes, I'm pretty active in that.
Are you also, Rich?
Oh yes. If you go to the thoughtcrimeradio.net blog, you'll see a lot of stuff about circumcision.
Did you say that the marriage broke down because of this issue also?
Yes, and I'm sure it's responsible for a great deal of marital dysfunction in this country and divorces. I mean, sex is designed by nature to create a strong bond between parents that lasts at least long enough for the child to reach adulthood. I mean, this is obviously what sex is for, what the pleasurable part of sex is for. And so medicine has been very systematically and methodically undermining our marriages here in the United States. I also wanted to mention that Western medical circumcision is different from the way they practice it in Israel or under traditional Judaic ceremonies. They take off a lot more of the erogenous neurological apparatus of the penis in the Western paradigm.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. And I will say this, Cliff High talks about the foreskin having a particular function, that when it meets with the vaginal wall, it actually triggers the male brain to release hormones of love and bonding. And when the foreskin has been removed, naturally the man's ability to produce those hormones and excrete them into his own body is going to be severely undermined as a result of this procedure. And I also heard Cliff High say, we have to go to break in just a minute. I've heard him say, they could have said, let's cut off a fingernail, let's cut off an earlobe, but they said, let's cut off the foreskin and pretend that God tells us to do it, because they knew how it would influence relationships.
Yes, and it's
absolutely
the impact on a society of widespread genital mutilation is just a recipe for a totalitarian society. This is a recipe for masses of alienated sociopaths who are helpless, who have learned helplessness,
Yes.
and have been betrayed at a very primal level, and are incapable of trusting each other. And this level of trust, trust is and empathy are necessary for political cohesion. If you want to have a politically potent movement, you need communities of people who can act in concert together to achieve shared objectives. And genital mutilation is an arrow right at the heart of that whole thing.
It sure is. We've got about less than a minute. Patricia, did you want to make a quick comment about it before we go to break?
Well, I just see on a psychological level how circumcision teaches the child that he is alone, that he is not protected, that he is in danger. And then, like Rich was saying, like the background of the screen on the computer, that goes with him for the rest of his life. I'm not safe. I will be betrayed. Women are my enemies because, the woman was the one that signed the consent form.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have to go to break. I'm sorry. We've got so much to share about this topic, but we will do it again after the break. Please stick around, folks. There's some very important information. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. You're here at Birth of a New Earth. I'm Janice Barcelo, here with Patricia Robinette, the author of Rape of Innocence, and Rich Winkle. He's the radio show host at thoughtcrimeradio.net. So we are talking about circumcision and obstetrical abuse. And before we went to the break, I was thinking about the impact on human sexuality and on human love that circumcision has. Now, I know that in the United States, we live in a culture where there's an incredible amount of erectile dysfunction and impotence and, a drying of the vagina because the glands is exposed and pulling all the fluids out of the vagina. We know that men are suffering, and so are their partners. Do either one of you want to make a comment about that?
Well, they've called it female frigidity, and blamed women for being unable to enjoy sex. And this is very Orwellian solution for the medical profession, which is very systematically censored all the research relating to how destructive this procedure is, and glorified the research, the bogus research that claims that it can cure everything from alcoholism to HIV.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a canary in the mine shaft, So if you'd like to know what it's like for a female, I can describe it fairly accurate or fairly well. It hurts when there is no foreskin on the penis. It hurts the woman. That is why many men complain of not getting all the sex that they want. It's because, the head of the penis, since it's not protected from the elements, it becomes more dry, and they call it caramelized, but it's like a callus.
It's
because,
calloused.
I'm sorry?
It is. It's calloused. The glands becomes calloused, yes.
The callus is calloused. So then, it rubs the tender mucosal tissue on the inside of the female, and there's abrasion and irritation, and infection happens, and
HIV transmission. HIV transmission is increased to the woman,
yes.
Which they never mention in their research.
Right. So, she's suffering. I mean, especially, the man only senses, the circumcised penis only senses friction and pressure and heat. That's it. It does not have all those really, really fine touch nerve endings anymore. So then, the guy is doing what he has learned to do solo, which is to, just move hard and fast. And he, I believe, assumes that is also what works for the female. But, he doesn't know because he doesn't have a natural penis. Now, someone who was raised with a foreskin on his penis knows that he does not want to move hard and fast because it would damage his foreskin. It would hurt him. So he, moves slowly and sensuously. The man with no foreskin, all the foreskin he has left is on the underside of the penis at the point where the head of the penis meets the shaft. And that's the only really sensitive part he has left. And so, the man will favor the underside of the penis while the woman's, most erogenous tissue is on the top of her opening. So, she wants him to press and to move so that it stimulates her clitoris and her own foreskin. But he wants to move to stimulate the only part that's left of the frenulum. So it's like they're at odds. And then she, wants to move slowly and sensuously, and he wants to move hard and fast. So it ends up being a war between the sexes. It really does. And that is the source of the war between the sexes, is circumcision.
Well, let me say also that there's a huge betrayal happening on the part of a mother that's willing to hand over her infant son for this kind of torture and abuse. And so it's a primal wound, like Rich said, and it's a primal betrayal on the part of the mother and the father, of course. But I think the mother has a very special role in this, and it needs to be addressed more. Before we ask Rich again to go talk more about this, I want to also stress that the exposed glands of the penis, that's supposed to be covered with the foreskin. It's kind of like your tongue is an internal organ and your eyeball is an internal organ. And if somebody came over to you and cut out your mouth and your tongue was hanging out all the time, your tongue would become rough and calloused because it's exposed all the time to things it's not supposed to be exposed to. And your tongue's ability to have exquisite taste would also be undermined because the tongue is hard and calloused and rough from being exposed. It's the same thing with the penis, you see? The sensitivity is gone. And again, I want to stress the rim of the penis is exposed where it should not be. And every time through intercourse, when the penis goes in and comes out, the penis is then taking all the fluids out of the female vagina with it, causing an unnatural drying and causing people in the United States probably to purchase the most lubricants imaginable, which are extremely toxic to the vagina. And it's totally because of circumcision. Rich, would you like to say anything about what I've just shared, or any comments at all?
Yeah, just to take back the terminology here, it really is, the so-called foreskin is not really skin. It's more like the lips of the mouth. It has an external and an internal membrane, which are entirely separate in their function. And we really should call it the penile lips or something, because it's just too easy to trivialize this whole thing if you just call it skin. It's not skin. It's much more than skin.
Well, right, because it has the most nerve endings. It's like, the foreskin on a clitoris. It has a tremendous amount of nerve endings to provide not only sexual pleasure, but as I said before, to activate the male brain for male bonding and human love. So this is huge. Did you want to say anything else about, the medical people will say, oh, it prevents HIV, or it prevents other infections. If you don't get your baby circumcised, he will have urinary tract infections. And I know we're talking to people in the UK. We're talking to men who are intact, who probably are not getting urinary tract infections or any of the stuff that the medical system is saying. But do you guys want to share about what the medical system is, the lies that they're perpetuating to keep this going?
Well, if you go to thoughtcrimeradio.net and look at my paper, Male Circumcision in the USA, you will see some of the history of all these bogus claims that have been disproven one after another. Everything from masturbatory insanity to alcoholism to cancer to HIV, they have all been disproven, up to and including HIV. HIV increases male to female HIV. Did I say? Yeah. Circumcision increases male to female HIV transmission due to the increased vaginal abrasion. And the overall picture that is drawn here from the history is that for whatever reason, medicine wants to continue molesting and traumatizing little baby boys. Possibly because they want to sell the foreskins, because they are a commodity. They can sell them to cosmetics companies and biotechnology companies. But it's not a surprise that medicine is in complete denial about this whole issue, because the legal liability is just astronomical.
Yes.
Did you want to say something about it, Patricia?
Well, I want to mention, just the very basics, that everyone is sold a bill of goods, and it sounds to me like a public relations company might have come up with the sales points. The sales points are: it's cleaner, it's neater, it's cuter, it prevents disease and all this. But if you look at any of the studies, it's very easy to see the flaws in them. For instance, the UTI, the urinary tract infection report is what it really was. About 1 or 2 at the most cases of urinary tract infection are prevented, ostensibly prevented by circumcision of 100 little boys. Now, little girls get a whole lot more urinary tract infections than boys. They get about 5 per 100. So how do they treat the little girls? They give them antibiotics. They do not cut their bodies, you know. So there are just many, many stories out there. You know, you hear from guys, they do assume that they will have to have it done later because they're told that. They do not have to have it done at all. In Europe, it's only like 1 in 16,000 men who, for medical purposes, has to have a circumcision. Yeah, there are many different ways around different problems that people perceive. I just got an email the other day. Someone said that, you know, he couldn't pull his foreskin back. And I read a story once by a young man who was married before his foreskin fully pulled back. And at that point, he bled like the woman bled, you know, 2 virgins. And, you know, that was a very bonding experience. So, you know, there's no rule about when it's supposed to pull back, but if it does become a problem, then all you need to do, just like with foreskin restoration, is to pull the skin, to stretch the skin. And you can do it manually. It's a very simple thing to do.
It's also important to point out.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's also important to point out that a great many cases of urinary tract infection in boys is caused by medical intervention because doctors are ignorant of when the foreskin is supposed to be retractable. And so they force it back, and that creates bleeding and infection. And there is research showing that the predominant number of cases of UTIs in boys in the United States is caused by bacteria which are hospital-based bacteria like staph.
Yeah, so, you know, you have mother after mother telling stories about bringing their intact sons to doctors who, as soon as the mother turns her head, the doctor will rip that foreskin to pull it back.
Right.
This is insanity. You know, there's a saying in the intact movement, when intact, never retract. Let the foreskin do what it naturally does and retract in its own time. That makes total sense. And if you force things, if you pull things, you're going to cause infection. You're going to cause major problems. I also want to say, you mentioned, Rich, about foreskins being a commodity. We have nurses' stories about opening refrigerators in hospitals, and there's placentas in there, infant cord blood, infant foreskins. Okay, we also have a culture where Satanism abounds, where infant cord blood is necessary for certain rituals, as are infant body parts. And this is what we really want to be careful about, folks, because if these forces get their hands on your children's body parts or your baby's cord blood, okay, we're talking about soul theft. Not only are they making money from selling these items, and women are rubbing, you know, onto their face and their cosmetics infant foreskin, okay, but we have satanic rituals happening. We have soul theft happening, attempted soul theft. And so hospitals are involved in this, and this needs to be pointed out. I know we got to go to break any second, but I want to say one more thing. That's something else about foreskin that people need, about the removal of the foreskin, that people need to know is when a penis is erect, okay, it's supposed to be pretty straight. But men who are circumcised often have penises that go like this. They bend, and that's because the foreskin has been removed, and it hurts the men to actually be fully erect.
Medicine has actually a term for this. It's called Peyronie's disease, and Bill Clinton has a case of this. It's interesting to notice, you know, that you know, he was responsible for a great many atrocities in our foreign policy, and the connection is not hard to make, I don't think.
Well, thank you very much. We do have to go to break, so I'm going to invite everybody to stick around. We have more important information right after this. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. You're here at Birth of a New Earth. I'm Janice Barcelo with Patricia Robinette and Rich Winkle. And when we broke, we were talking about the satanic influences of circumcision. I also wanted to say something about the Jewish tradition of circumcision, which is also satanic because you have a lot of people standing around chanting in their weird gowns and strange hats and stuff like that while the infant is being cut. And in some of these rituals, the rabbi actually sucks the blood of the mutilated penis, the penis that he just mutilated on that baby boy. And we also know that Satanists are involved in the ritual consumption of human blood, that they are involved in ritual torture. So I think it's time that we put the pieces together to see how Satanism is influencing our religions and even what we do to our children. Do either of you have the courage to comment on what I just shared?
Well, I'm so grateful that you raised this issue because it hadn't occurred to me until you mentioned it to me several years ago on the air on my radio show that it is satanic ritual abuse. There can be no more violent act than to directly assault and cut off the flesh of the body tissue associated with love, of an innocent child. This is just, and especially the way they do it in the medical field. The Jewish procedure, like I said, is less. It's not quite as. It doesn't amputate it quite as much flesh. It's also quicker. The way that it's done in medical wards is much more torturous and amputates a great deal more flesh. You just can't, especially when you realize that there is no medical reason to do this. It really raises questions of, what is behind all this, and does it have something to do with the marketing of Satanism now, which is becoming more and more brazen in our popular culture? The satanic ritual that was played on the Emmy Awards recently. It should raise questions in people's minds.
Hallelujah, that people, it has to be so in our face that people begin to question what it is that's being blasted at us and that we're subjecting our children to. It's amazing to me. Patricia, did you want to comment on the satanic element of this at all?
Well, I just wanted to add that there's a huge bit of humiliation in the whole thing. Just to even expose your private parts to someone else and then to have other people watching and then to have someone cut on them. This is very humiliating for the subject. And I have heard men who remember that aspect, if none other, of their circumcision.
And people will say, well, how do babies remember? And I want to stress that the body has a mechanism to protect us, which means that the memories, when they're pre-verbal, they're implicit. They're in our cells. They're not in the form of words necessarily the way our cortex would process memory. They are in our reptilian brain and in our limbic system, and they influence every aspect of our lives. They influence our health, our personality, our relationships, all sorts of things. And it is huge what happens to us at the beginning of life, which is why the dark forces are so intent in getting to us as we're entering this dimension. I want to stress also, going back a minute to the blood sucking in the Jewish tradition, to say that in New York alone, 13 babies have died. Just in the last, 13 babies have gotten herpes just in the last few years from the rabbi who has herpes and gives it to the baby when that rabbi sucks the blood off the baby's penis. 2 babies, 3 babies now, because another baby just died. This was in Israel that the baby died. All right. Babies are dying from this procedure. Babies are getting herpes. Herpes causes death. And herpes also causes permanent brain damage. So a few of the children also have permanent brain damage from the rabbi sucking the blood off of the mutilated penis. And the ritual persists.
Yes, Actually, circumcision is all about brain damage. That's exactly what every circumcision results in,
Yep.
is a reorganization of the neural tissue that's associated with love and empathy and ecstatic pleasure. These regions of the brain are starved of sensory input and they die.
Not to mention that the wires, the neurological wiring, okay, that should be coded for love, for pleasure, right, for deep feelings of bonding, those neurological wires get crossed immediately at circumcision with extreme violence, extreme betrayal, extreme pain. All right, this could be also at the root of sadomasochism. We are positive that sadomasochism is not part of the natural plan. It is not from the divine. It is part of a satanic agenda and is the result of brutal things that have happened to children early in life. Okay? And that's how Satanism works. They get people sexually aroused and they torture them, and they get them to correlate sexual pleasure with torture. We've heard this from one victim after another coming out of the Satanist community.
When you start raising this issue with people, they immediately think of their own doctors and say, well, "This guy is a nice guy. He wouldn't do anything deliberate to harm my baby," you know. But you know, there's no more hierarchical, authoritarian structure in society than medicine itself, and doctors are very well trained to follow orders. Medical school is a boot camp. It's a form of boot camp. It's a form of brainwashing in the same way that a military boot camp is a form of brainwashing. They deprive them of sleep. They keep them under constant stress. They're gauged. They're graded in terms of their willingness to follow orders. So doctors are, you know, people who listen to this show are probably familiar with the idea of the infiltration of the authoritative the authority structure of our society by these subversive elements. And medicine is a high-value target for these people.
I mean, doctors are suffering from trauma-based mind control, many of them. As you said, Rich, they're in their training, which involves incredible sleep deprivation, making them do horrible things like slice open bodies and cut off infant body parts, okay, in order to qualify to become a doctor. These are things that have to be done. In the same way, in order to qualify to be part of a satanic cult, you have to, as Kurth told us last week on the show, you have to kill a dog that you were recently bonded with, or maybe cut off the dog's genitals, or who knows? Who knows what they've got, you know, in store, or that they're making people do in order to qualify to become a member in their cult. Okay, that's not to say all doctors understand that they're part of a satanic cult, but they are. It is a cult. And there's not very many benefits coming out of the American medical system these days, that's for sure. Patricia, did you want to comment on this?
There were a couple of things that I wanted to say before the end of the show. I don't know how close we are.
Close.
But one is that we lose about 300 doctors or more every year to suicide, because you're right, not all of these doctors understand that they are being trained as they would be in a satanic cult, and so they can't live with themselves and they commit suicide. And the other thing that I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned before we stopped was that one of the side effects, you know, they say that there are all these medical reasons to perform circumcision, but then they don't tell you that 9%, that's, you know, 9+%, and this is even in Medline, you know, on the internet, 9% or more of the little boys who are circumcised will develop a condition called meatal stenosis, which is a hardening of the opening to the urethra. So it actually has far more bad effects than it has good effects, even by all of their best case scenarios. So, you know, if they quote to you statistics, ask them for numbers, because numbers will really give you the right idea.
Even if you ignore the psychological impact, which is even more severe than the physical impact of this procedure,
Yes.
the science is just not there.
Mm-hmm. You know, I recently read an article that there's been an increase, 119% increase in the United States in what's called revision circumcisions. And this has happened in my family. I have a half-sister who is a robot, basically, and hasn't questioned anything and has had her son circumcised. And this poor baby, within a very short time, was put back in the hands of his torturers because they screwed it up. They butchered his penis. They screwed it up, and so she put him back in their hands to redo the circumcision. I've heard stories of circumcisions having to be done 3 times. Okay? Because they're screwing it up. One baby dies in the United States approximately every other day from this procedure that has no medical benefit or necessity whatsoever.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that circumcision really is at the very heart of the campaign of social control in the United States. It's this has everything. It has child abuse, torture, corruption, falsified science, satanic influences. I mean, this is a massive scandal, and people could do no better than to investigate this issue.
And when you say it has a political component, can you say more about that?
Well, politics is all about the ability of groups of people to get together and work for a shared objective, and that requires some degree of community, consciousness, organizing, empathy, the ability to connect and communicate with people, not just at a verbal level, but on an emotional level. And circumcision, it just drives a stake into the heart of this whole process. It's created a society of sociopaths who are incapable of emotional connectedness, who feel helpless in the face of superior authority, because it's all about brainwashing. What we're talking about now is brainwashing. This is a form of brainwashing in the same sense that MK Ultra is a form of brainwashing.
You know, in the sense that it's connected to brainwashing, trauma-based mind control, part of what the Satanists do is they try to create dissociation, right? They try deliberately make the spirit leave the body because of the amount of torture these kids are, bombarded with. The spirit leaves the body because, the soul and the spirit can't handle. The soul feels everything, okay? So it checks out. It literally leaves the body. And at this point, demonic energies can come in, and, the part of our personality that would be vulnerable and sensitive and kind and gentle has to step out. And a part that's much more rough and tough, that can handle the abuse, has to step in. This is what's happening with circumcision. And if you watch a circumcision, if you watch a video, you'll see what I'm talking about, because you'll see the baby screaming, writhing his head because that's the only thing he can move, making sounds, okay, the likes of which you will never hear anywhere else besides when a baby is being ritually, sexually tortured, okay? And at some point the baby will stop crying. You'll see a blank stare, right? All of the breathing will be very, very shallow. This is called parasympathetic shock. Right? This is when this is like an animal in the wild will freeze if he can't run or he can't fight. That animal will freeze and play dead in order to protect its life. And that's what's happening with the baby's nervous system during circumcision. Dissociation, totally. Disassociation out of the body. Okay? And now we can program you. Now we can make you into somebody that's willing to sign up for the U.S. military and go and kill people you don't know and drop depleted uranium on the earth because somebody told you to do it. That's programming. Do either one of you want to comment on that?
I think that circumcision teaches not to question authority and that you don't have a vote. Because if you start crying and screaming, they just start cutting, hurting you more. So it doesn't work for you to complain. It doesn't work for you to speak out. And so you get conditioned to believe that you don't matter, you don't have a vote, and that the authority figure is going to win no matter what you do.
It's a very good point. Thank you, Patricia. Rich, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to stress this is a profoundly political act. This is an act of oppression against a newborn baby, and you can't you can hardly think of a more effective way to subjugate a person than to invade and assault and torture them in this way.
And of course, you know, if you want to control the world, it's very important to control the men, because men are powerful and can stand up against evil. In fact, that's what the sacred masculine is all about, right? Protecting and defending the earth and children and life. Okay, but they've turned it on its head, and they're torturing boys for a very good reason, and we had better get on it, folks. We're almost out of time. Rich and Patricia, can you just tell people where they can find you?
The blog that I am involved in, as well as Patricia and Kurth, is thoughtcrimeradio.net. All one word, thoughtcrimeradio.net.
Can people listen to your radio show somewhere, or do they need to be in Missouri for that?
Well, I'm not doing the radio show at the moment, but there are still podcasts online which are accessible through the website.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Patricia? Where can they find you? Very quickly, 1 minute left.
My main website is patriciarobinette.com, and actually you can spell it with an E or without an E. I spell it with no E, but everyone spells it with an E, so I reserve both names. So patriciarobinette.com.
patriciarobinette.com and therapeofinnocence.com, yes?
Yes, and you can find the Rape of Innocence through that. You know, there's a labyrinth, and if you push on body and then circumcision, you'll find it.
Thank you very much. And you can find me at birthofanewearth.com or birthofanewearth.blogspot.com. Janice Barcelo signing off with Patricia Robinette and Rich Winkle. Thank you so much for being with us today, folks. Thank you to everybody at the People's Voice, especially Julian. Thank you, Patricia and Rich. We'll be back again next week for a great show. Bye for now.